Hello, everyone.
All right.
Hello.
Welcome to the PTLS Life Unfiltered podcast.
Where we talk about PTLS, we answer that question that everyone ponders. What is life like with PTLS and how it affects us?
My name is Christian.
And my name is Christian, and guess what? I have PTLS.
You mean Madison?
And I'm Julie. I'm just the moderator. And we have as guests. Who do we have as a guest today?
Welcome to our podcast.
Today we have a special guest on our show.
Mom, you're gonna do the intro
And
of the
guest
guest.
today we have Angie and Tyler.
Hi.
Hi. Happy to have you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We are honored to be here.
So how are you guys doing, first of all?
We're great.
Good.
Awesome. All right.
Okay.
Go on,
So
Matt.
first question.
Okay, hold on. Without further ado, let's roll.
Okay.
I think that's where we are.
Who's got the first question?
Madison.
I do. So,
Okay.
tell us about yourself.
About me or about Tyler?
About
I
you.
guess both of you.
Well, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler, if you want to, you can.
You can.
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Angie and I am a retired nurse. We live in Mississippi, as you can tell from the accent. And I have 3 boys. Tyler was my youngest. There was a 10-year gap between my second one and Tyler. He just turned 34. We live, I would say, on a little funny farm. We call it our funny farm. We've had horses, goats, chickens. Currently, we only have chickens at the present. But we garden, and Tyler likes to fish. We like outdoor activities, and he likes to fish and garden, and that's about it.
All right. So tell us about your child.
About Tyler? Okay.
Yes, about Tyler.
So,
Oh boy.
when Tyler was born, we're going to go back to the beginning of time. When Tyler was born, he was a good birth weight. He was like 7'3". But then he was having a lot of trouble with formulas, and he just wasn't gaining weight. Took him to several doctors. He had what they call failure to thrive, which I think is common in a lot of PTLS children.
It's very common in people.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a hard time finding a formula that would agree with him. He was a very, very picky eater, and we started noticing that he was having some developmental delays.
Yeah.
As in sitting up, talking. He walked at 11 months, so that was pretty on target. Yeah. But a lot of speech delays, and I took him to the doctor, and they kept saying that he was spoiled because he had 2 older brothers. Well, a mother's intuition goes a long way, and I knew something was wrong. And fast forwarding, he just had a lot of gross motor, fine motor skill problems, hearing problems, speech delays. Well, we found out eventually when he was 5 that he needed to have tubes put in his ears, and he ended up having 5 sets of tubes. They said it was like he was hearing underwater, but his eustachian tubes were very, very small. But then once he started school, he started having, problems in school, learning disabilities, and I knew something was wrong with him. Took him to every doctor within a 200-mile radius that I could find, and nobody could come up with anything. We just started. He eventually got into special education classes in school, and that was pretty rough because not having a diagnosis for your child and trying to fight the education system. And I was actually a nurse at the school. I was an employee there, which made it kind of hard, you know, because I had to work with the teachers, but then advocate for Tyler. And it was very rough. It's like, you know, something's wrong with your child, but you can't get any answers. And the year he turned 17, he came in my office one day at school. You know, I was a school nurse, and said that he was well, he had been coming in. He loved going to the gym, loved running, playing basketball. He ran the whole time he was in the gym, and loved it. He loved school, loved everybody. But he a couple of times he came in the room and he said, "I'm just tired." And I was like, "Okay, Tyler, lay down a minute." And he, you know, lay down a few minutes to go back. Well, that particular day he came in and he just said, "I don't feel good, Mama." And, you know, I questioned what he'd been doing. He said he'd been in the gym. So I told him to lay down a little bit. I was busy doing paperwork or something. And I said, "Tyler, you got to get up and go back to class." Well, when I went over and looked at him, I noticed he was real glassy eyed looking, and I knew something was wrong. So I checked his blood pressure. Well, he had such an arrhythmia that I couldn't even get a reading. My biggest fear was that somebody had given him some candy or something at school that had drugs. And not Tyler would never knowingly take drugs, but he loved everybody. And that was always my biggest fear, is that somebody would give him drugs or something, and you know, and him have a you know, a problem from that. So I put him in my vehicle and rushed him to the doctor. Told him I thought he had been you know, somebody had given him drugs. Well, they did an EKG on him, and she checked him out. She said, "No, he's fine. He's okay. His blood pressure's okay." And I said, "I want you to do an EKG." So they did an EKG, and then they came back out and said, "We've got a problem. He's got to come back for an echocardiogram in the morning." So we went back for the echocardiogram. We'll come to find out he had a hole in his heart.
Yes.
That we found out when he was 17, and we were referred to Vanderbilt. So he had to have surgery to repair that. When we got there, we met with a cardiologist, and he immediately, like, he was in the room 5 minutes, and he said, "Has he ever had genetic testing?" And I said, "No, but I've been begging for it all these years." And he said, "We're going to test him." And so they tested him, and it was like, immediately we got the results back that he had Potocki-Lupski Syndrome.
Yeah.
And that was when he was 17.
That's not always easy to say.
So it took us 17 years to get a diagnosis.
Yes.
But and that is when it just, like, I was floored. Of course, he had his heart repaired. We came back home, and my oldest son did live in McKinney, which y'all know how close that is to where y'all are, and McKinney, Texas. And he said, "Mama, I just looked this up." He said, "The president of the PTLS Foundation lives real close to me." He said, "Call her." So I called Julie, and that was the beginning of our friendship and her. I couldn't have made it without Julie. I boo-hooed. I don't know if Julie remembers. I just boo-hooed. And we talked for the longest.
I remember.
And then it was just like, oh my gosh, it was not that I wanted my child to have, you know, a syndrome, a rare syndrome, but it was an answer. And I knew then things I needed to look for that we had not looked for previously. And so that's how it all started.
Okay.
Goodness. Yeah, I remember that call. I remember that phone call and that meeting. That was, that was something.
Yeah.
What a story.
And then to find out that Julie had a son, you know, that was close to Tyler's age that he could relate to, it was just a godsend. It was just a godsend.
Yeah. That meeting was a really good meeting.
Yeah.
The first time. Yeah. It was good to see the boys just kind of connect because they knew.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that moment pretty well.
And y'all y'all only live like what, 15 minutes from where my son. It was just crazy. It was just,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Not far away.
Wow.
Okay.
That's something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
Madison, you have a question?
Yeah. What were the first signs that something was different about Tyler?
Well, the first thing we noticed was the failure to thrive and the difficulty with feeding. That was the first thing we noticed, and then the speech delays. It was, you know, Tyler even made up his own. He was starting to make up his own sign language. Like, I got this dog. Like, that would be milk. He would do that, and that would mean milk. And
I don't think I actually
knew,
knew that, but okay.
do what?
I don't think I actually knew that, but okay.
Yeah, that's what he would. That's how he would tell us he wanted milk, and that was the second thing. He was probably 2 and had not even said mama yet, and I was like, something's not right. I just knew something was not right, and so that was the second thing, and then probably, you know, it really wasn't just real obvious until we got to school and started, you know, noticing that he was having problems.
There were problems.
Yeah, well, he had 5-year surgeries, but you know, we noticed he was having trouble, you know, keeping up in class.
Okay, so how old was your child when they were diagnosed?
He was 17.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah. What made you go get the genetic test?
Well, that's when we ended up at Vanderbilt seeing the cardiologist there about his heart. He was the one that referred us. So it was like, you know, 17 years of asking. And, you know, the doctor walks in the room and he was like, and I could kind of tell, I could just tell, you know, Tyler's facial features, and I could tell something was different. And he walked in and saw it immediately and referred us to the geneticist there. So
Right.
that's how we found.
Okay, so this may be a deep question, but tell us about the day of diagnosis.
It was I was, first of all, they called because we were already back in Greenville, and the nurse called and said he has a rare syndrome called Potocki-Lupski Syndrome. I said, a what?
A what?
I was like, couldn't it just be Smith Jones or something? And anyway, I don't know. It was, I was kind of shocked. I'm not going to say shocked. I knew something was wrong, but it was more relief than anything, I think, to have an answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, being first in the world, fourth in the world and first in the country, I was a bit too young to really understand it. I mean, I was told that I had special needs, but that was kind of like, that was that, you know, like.
Well, let's ask Tyler. Tyler, how did you feel when you were told that you had this genetic syndrome?
It was shocking.
Yeah, because you were old enough to understand that there were, you know, that there was it's a diagnosis, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, Tyler was just one of those happy to be in the world kids that I would be standing in line and loved everybody. I would be standing in line at the grocery store, and he would literally reach out to the person in front of me trying to hug them, you know. And so, yeah, you were little. Yeah.
How old?
Maybe 2 or something. But he was just an easy child. He was very easy. Loved everybody. Didn't hardly get in trouble. Very, very seldom got in trouble. But he just, I don't know. Tyler really didn't have much of a reaction to it. It didn't like scare him or anything, I don't think.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Madison,
Okay.
why don't you tell your story before you ask the next question?
Okay. Well, when I found out, for the people that don't know, you could watch the last episode of this podcast on YouTube. But for this particular point, just had to plug that.
Thank you, Madison. Thank you.
You're welcome. When I found out, short story short, long, I think it's long story short, because I don't want to keep on yodeling and, talking. Is I was upstairs and my mom had come home from work and she and my dad and my siblings were downstairs and they called me downstairs and they told me that I had like PTLS, and I instantly started crying because I was like, bingo, there's a missing puzzle piece to who I am, that I've always wondered. And
How old were you?
I was 20.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
You were older like Tyler.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler was diagnosed. I don't remember how old he wasn't in. I think you guys said it earlier.
17, I think.
He was 17. Yeah, 17.
What
So Tyler, you were 17 when you were diagnosed, right? And Madison being 20 when she was diagnosed. So both of you went through your school years not having a diagnosis.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you, Angie, do you think that was a benefit or a hindrance?
That's a good question.
That's a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
It was a benefit because since we didn't actually have a diagnosis for him, I pushed him. I pushed him to do things that I might not have if I had known, that, but I did push him to do things out of his comfort zone. Not anything like bad, but just pushed him out of his comfort zone. And, I think there are a lot of things that Tyler did that he wouldn't have done probably if we had I don't know if that makes sense, but then on the bad side, the bad thing about it was not having a diagnosis. There were teachers that just thought, oh, he's being lazy. If you don't have a diagnosis, they just assume. Well, I'm going to back up and tell you, we did take Tyler to the children's, I can't remember the developmental clinic, child developmental clinic in Jackson. And when he was 4 or 5, because this was at the time, we didn't know this at the time. It was right after this we found out. He couldn't hear anything. His eardrums were so retracted that the ear doctor said it was like he was hearing underwater. And so his kindergarten teacher was telling us that she said, I'll call him up and ask him something. She said, he just stands there and looks at me. So he repeated 4-year-old kindergarten because of that. And after that is when we took him. They diagnosed him with ADD and put him on medicine but it was the whole team. It was like speech, pediatric, the whole team of people and had ADD. And so they put him on Ritalin, and he already was bone thin. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. But then after that is when we took him to the ENT, and he discovered that he couldn't hear. He was like, well, no wonder he's just looking at her. He can't hear anything, So it was kind of crazy for a little bit. But yeah, not having a diagnosis was kind of hard in that sense because, you have teachers that just don't want to work with you if they don't think you've got something in writing from a doctor wrong with them,
Now, would you think that even with a diagnosis that would also hinder, because the teachers will see a diagnosis and just think, well, I don't know the diagnosis, so he probably can't progress any further than this, and just kind of brush him off. It's kind of like the same thing, not knowing and having it.
I really don't know. I just know how it, was with. Now he did have some excellent teachers, some excellent
Yes.
Yeah.
teachers that
Yeah.
worked
Yes.
great with him, but there were a few that I tangled with, and like I said, I had to work with them, but I even had to get a parent advocate in one time, but I didn't care.
Yeah, it's kind of like Christian. Yeah, with Christian, he didn't have his diagnosis. I mean, he had it when he was younger, but people didn't know anything about it. And instead of going with the diagnosis, because there wasn't anything known about it, we just went with other health impaired,
Yeah.
which really gave the tools to say, do everything you can and expect the most out of him instead of do everything you can, but don't expect anything. Just kind of, assume he can't. Instead, they actually took the other way and assumed competence, but that he would need a little extra help, which I think benefited, personally, I think it benefited Christian moving along just because he didn't have a label to hold him back.
Tyler was in regular education classes except math until he got to high school.
I hate math.
Until he got, and he just,
Me too.
he has, I mean, and I'm not saying this to make fun of Tyler, but he can't count money.
I hate
It's just like a block, a total block. But now, as far as reading, spelling, science, he loved science. I mean, he was in regular education classes up until he got into high school, and then he had to go into self-contained special education.
It sounds like a lot of the kids, including Christian, probably Madison as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Next question.
Okay.
What are your dreams for Tyler?
Tyler, you want to tell him what your dreams are?
What dreams?
Like for the future. What do you want for the future?
Ooh.
Loaded question, I know.
Yeah.
You be thinking about it, and I'll tell him what I want.
You go first.
Okay, so Tyler has his driver's license. He took driver's ed in high school, got his driver's license. The driver ed teacher, I loved him. He was one of our coaches, and he was great with Tyler. He was. And Tyler passed the test, got his license, and he did drive. Never drove by himself, but he did drive a little bit. But then he got it was making him real anxious. And so I thought, if he gets into a predicament or something, and he might panic and end up hurting himself. So he quit driving. I'm not sure if I really want him to ever drive again, but I would love for Tyler to be able to live maybe not completely by himself, but more independent in the future with somebody to oversee him, like, and to maybe find a job that would suit him. And it would take somebody very patient to hire him. Tyler can do things. He's just very unsure of himself, and you have to.
Yeah.
You can't say, Tyler, go take the clothes out of the dryer, put the clothes in the washer back. You have to one step at a time. And you have to keep saying, yes, you're doing it right. Yes, you're doing it right. So it would take a very patient person.
That's the same thing with me. I'm like, am I doing it right? Like,
Very unsure of himself.
Sure. How about you, Tyler?
Let's see. Probably get a job. Number one.
Okay.
Maybe get married. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oh Lord.
If the right person comes along, right?
Yeah. When you know, you know.
Yeah. When you know,
I'm not sure what else.
Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Last one is another eat one. How does it feel to be a PTLS parent?
PTLS parent?
Yes.
I feel very blessed that Tyler's in our life. I felt like he was given to us as a special gift.
Don't start crying now, Mom.
It's a mom thing. We have to cry.
Okay.
The road has been bumpy and difficult, but it's also been full of a lot of love and joy and happiness. And So it's right now Tyler's dealing with some pretty severe anxiety. That's been really rough watching him suffer through this and not being able to get the help that he needs. That's the hardest part, is
Mhm.
when you see your child suffer and you can't really get the answers you need.
And that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's only been recently. I mean, he hasn't
A
had
year.
that all his life. It's been a year. Okay.
Well, he's had some anxiety and OCD, but it just blew up this year. Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. Do we have any
Well-
more questions?
Well,
I think that's
I'm sorry. Can y'all hear the dog snoring?
yeah.
Like
Oh,
a grown
okay,
man.
here's a bonus question that I don't have in my notes. So do you feel that the PTLS Outreach Foundation has helped unlock Tyler's potential?
Oh, 100%, because Julie wrangled me into being on the board. And so I have been, yeah, I let her talk me into it. And I mean, I love it. I'm glad to help, but you know, being able to go to the conventions and meet
Mhm.
parents and talk to, you know, I've met a lot of friends through there, and you know, we've become close. And I don't think we would have just been like treading water if we hadn't had the foundation.
Yes.
It's invaluable to us.
Amen to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And our fearless leader, Judy. Judy.
I'm trying.
Oh.
That's the fearless. I don't know.
Jeez.
Well, we greatly appreciate you being part of the team and
exactly.
keeping it going.
All right.
Do we have any more questions?
None from me. What about you,
Okay.
Madison?
none from me.
Okay. Very
Well,
good.
Angie, thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on.
you're welcome. I enjoyed it.
And thank
My
you,
pleasure.
listeners.
And everybody can hear your story and, maybe, understand where you're coming from, and maybe they have the same issues or, backstory as you do. Who knows,
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Because we
Right.
all have a different journey.
That's right.
Amen to that.
Yep.
And thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
And
you,
thank
Angie. Thank
You're
you, Tyler.
welcome. You're welcome.
good
We
to
see you.
enjoyed it.
Well,
And your
Tyler.
puppy.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to the PTLS Life Unfiltered podcast, where you get them on YouTube or Apple or whatever.
Yep.
This is Christian.
And this is Madison.
Stay unfiltered.
And always unlocked for potential.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.